Jane Smith is sitting on a Lanza machine bound for Frankfurt, Germany. She empties her second glass of red wine and fastens her seatbelt because the plane is about to land. When Jane exits the aircraft, she goes straight to customs. She shows the officer her American passport. It's black. "Why are you here?" the officer asks. "Supporting technical consultations at the consulate," Jane responds. The officer stamps her passport, and she passes through. Jane grabs some euros from an ATM, takes a cab to a nearby hotel, and checks in. Jane lied a little just now during the customs check. She is not working for a consulate, and despite her passport, she is not a diplomat. Jane is a CIA agent, a hacker. She's visiting a covert base of her agency, secretly set up within the American consulate in Frankfurt. But this base in the heart of Europe is just one of a giant network spanning all across the globe. What are their functions, and how do these bases operate on foreign territory? CIA's global hacking program. Spy stations. What are the Americans doing here?
The CIA.
The CIA.
CIA.
The CIA.
Jane enters the hotel room and drops off her bags. She was prepared for this trip. She's been given instructions on how to get around in Frankfurt. Stores are closed on Sunday. Gas stations are not a good place for fine dining. Stuff like that. We all know this thanks to the extensive leaks called Vault 7 from a few years back. Generally, this video largely relies on leaked information and statements of retired agents. It was a 9-hour flight from Washington, D.C. to Frankfurt. Jane is pretty exhausted and takes a shower. She is very careful not to leave anything that could identify her unattended. She takes her phone and laptop with her to the bathroom. Freshly dressed, Jane takes the U5 subway towards Poingesheim. She gets off at Gnarstrasse, just a few hundred meters north of the consulate. Frankfurt hosts the largest U.S. consulate in the world. Officially, it is serving American residents in the region, but in truth, it is doing much more than that. At the main gate, Jane shows her black passport and is handed a yellow visitor's badge. She follows the signs to the employee entrance alongside the consulate building on the left. Jane holds up her yellow badge at the door and is buzzed into the building by a guard. Inside the building, Jane walks through a number of corridors and through a large, heavy door to post 1. A U.S. Marine is waiting behind a glass window. Jane gives her the yellow badge, and she gets a blue one instead. Jane can finally enter her new office and get to work. She calls her person of contact and gets to know the other agents at the station. In 2013, news broke that the U.S. spied on then German Chancellor Angela Merkel's private phone for over 10 years. The NSA may have been spying on Chancellor Angela Merkel, a spokesman for the German leader. Spy unit of the NSA and CIA ran the operation. Officially, it does not exist. Unofficially, it is running spy operations from almost 100 U.S. embassies all across the world, including Frankfurt. But Jane works for another unit here. She works for the European branch of the Center for Cyber Intelligence, the CIA's hacking division. Jane and others are developing cyber weapons. There are over 1,000 hacking systems, and several hundred million lines of code in the CIA's arsenal. Some of these hacking tools are extremely powerful. The CIA could turn devices from Apple, Google, Samsung, and many others into secret microphones. There are tools that bypass encryption from messengers like WhatsApp, Signal, or Telegram, allowing the agency to collect texts and voice messages. But there are also attack systems like fine dining, which only work from up close. This is where Frankfurt's strategic location comes into play. The Schengen Agreement allows Jane to travel from Frankfurt to almost any European country without border control. If Jane wanted to penetrate high-security targets that are not connected to the internet, she could simply take a train, stick a USB drive loaded with malware into a target PC, and be back in Frankfurt by supper. Jane is a very talented hacker. If one day she decided to leave the CIA, she could have a very promising career as a cybersecurity expert. All she'd have to do is build a portfolio and launch her own website. Jane has been working at the base for some time when she gets a phone call. Her superiors need her expertise at another location. She says goodbye to her colleagues, checks out of her hotel room, and buys single malt whiskey with the remaining euros in the duty-free shop at the airport. Jane's next destination is Australia. Jane gets off the plane and walks to customs, and things do not go smoothly. One of the officers seems suspicious about her and selects Jane for secondary screening. But she's prepared. Agents like Jane are usually trained here. Camp Peary, or as most people in the CIA call it, the farm. A roughly 10,000-acre piece of land near Williamsburg, Virginia. It was established during World War II as a military training center. Later, it was transformed into a camp for Italian and German war prisoners. In 1951, the CIA took over and turned it into a secret spy school. Of course, not officially. In fact, the CIA has built an entire fake city there. There are multiple houses and dormitories for students and staff. For training, the site has several shooting ranges, boathouses at the river, driving courses, and an airfield. Students learn everything they need to know about life as a secret agent in the field, from basic weapons training all the way to the handling of explosives, how to evade pursuers, and field surveillance. Students practice how to infiltrate a border that is tightly guarded by watchtowers and police dogs. Enemy capture is simulated by kidnapping students from their dorm and interrogating them. There's even a mock prison where students learn how to deal with military confinement. If training needs to be even more hardcore, students are brought to Harvey Point, just a few hours south of the farm. Jane stands in front of a customs officer at the Australian airport. She remembers how to survive secondary screening. According to a CIA training manual, the two most common questions in this situation are, "Why are you here?" and "Where are you staying?" Jane learned how to maintain her cover no matter what. When asked, Jane gives a quick and concise answer, no pause and no delaying sounds between question and response, just as the manual says. She knows that any unnecessary information or overly specific answers might lengthen the interview, so she keeps it short and simple. She tries to stay calm, no swallowing, no lip biting, nothing that can make her seem nervous, and it works. After a few minutes, the officer hands Jane her passport, and she's free to enter the country. Jane is sitting with her colleagues in a casino in Alice Springs, a small town right in the heart of the Australian outback. There are a lot of Americans all around her, which is not unusual. Most of them work at Pine Gap, a nearby military base run by the Australian and US governments. Jane and others are playing a weird American dice game called Craps when a group of Australian YouTubers join them. Together they drink, they laugh, and maybe talk a bit too much about their work. The Americans in this casino are no ordinary soldiers, and Pine Gap is not your usual military base. Pine Gap is a top-secret spy facility. Roughly 1,000 people work at the so-called Joint Defense Facility, which is quite misleading in name. In fact, in its early years, Australians only worked as cooks, painters, or janitors, while today almost half the staff is Australian and the other half American. In reality, the CIA and the NSA call the shots here. While Pine Gap was originally used as a defensive site to keep track of Soviet nuclear missiles during the Cold War, US intelligence quickly realized how useful this base could truly be. Today, it is the US's most important intelligence collection station in the world. There are 38 radar dishes all across the base, many of them enclosed in random, huge golf ball-like structures. They are built to hide and protect the antennas inside them. Most of these antennas communicate with US spy satellites like Orion 3, 5, 7, and 9. These spy satellites are geosynchronous. They move in orbit with exactly the same speed as the Earth's rotation. This way, the CIA can intercept almost all wireless communication from Europe, Africa, and Asia 24/7. The immensely powerful NSA spy programs Echelon and X-Keyscore, which Edward Snowden made public in 2013, are also operated from Pine Gap. These programs are used to systematically collect everything, from online chats to phone calls and emails. At the heart of the base sits the operations building. On a total of around 2,000 square meters, roughly the size of a small IKEA, the CIA, NSA, and other agencies analyze all incoming intelligence data. Pine Gap played a vital role in America's war on terror. It provided real-time data for soldiers on the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was used to locate targets for US drone strikes during which hundreds of civilians were killed. A very recent report indicates that Pine Gap intelligence may have assisted Israeli forces to attack targets in Gaza. For that reason, a group of protesters tried to block the entrance to Pine Gap at the end of last year. Jane has seen places few people in the world have ever been to. Covert hacking bases in the heart of Europe, training facilities in the US, and spy stations in Australia. She knows many of the CIA's secrets. On September 6, 2006, President George Bush admitted what many people had already suspected.
So I'm announcing today that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Abu Zubaydah, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, and 11 other terrorists in CIA custody have been transferred to the United States Naval Base at Guantanamo Bay.
In this speech, Bush acknowledged that the CIA was running a network of secret prisons all across the world, so-called black sites. The most well-known CIA prison is Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. The prison was built for international terrorist suspects. Just 4 months after the attacks on 9/11, the first 20 people arrived. But Guantanamo is no regular prison. In most cases, there are no official charges, no trials, and no formal convictions. A total of 800 people were brought here. Some have been exposed to enhanced interrogation techniques, most commonly known as torture. Often, the CIA did not have clear evidence on their inmates. The exact number and locations of black sites are still unknown. Some were run by foreign secret services. At least 10 of these prisons were built and operated by the CIA. Over 50 governments participated in some way. If the CIA suspected someone of being a terrorist, they sometimes became part of the agency's extraordinary rendition program, or simply kidnapping. The suspect was illegally shackled, blindfolded, and transported via plane to one of the CIA's black sites. Some of these prisons were allegedly planned from the CIA base in Frankfurt, while the farm was allegedly involved in rendition flights. One of the most important prisons of the CIA was here, on a Polish military base near the small village of Stare Kiekuty. Inside this two-story villa, the CIA built one of its very first prisons after 9/11, codenamed Quartz. The CIA tortured multiple suspects here. As compensation for using the place, the CIA paid at least $15 million and outfitted the base with $300,000 worth of security cameras. After many years of denial, in 2014, the Polish government finally admitted that it hosted the secret CIA prison. Since then, the European Court of Human Rights has found multiple European countries responsible for letting the CIA violate several human rights in prisons on their territory. In 2009, President Obama ordered all black sites to be closed, but to this day, Guantanamo Bay still holds roughly 30 men.